Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Dragon Prince Yuan Season 2 episode number 5 based on novel. So let's start. The trio had finally successfully entered the House of Geniuses and were led to their room by a servant. It seems that someone is out to get us. Once they were in the room, Luluo's eyebrows knitted together. Someone as sharp as her had naturally realized that there were some problems with Xiao Luo's attitude. Zhu Yuan frowned. It was the first time they had come here, and none of them knew anyone. Why were they being targeted? On the way here, the only one they had offended was the Jiyu clan. Could the Jiyu clan's hands have reached all the way here? Luluo seemed to be able to read Zhu Yuan's thoughts, shaking her head as she said, "The faction behind the House of Geniuses is the City Lord residents. I doubt that Jiyu clan can make them do anything." Zhu Yuan's eyes narrowed slightly. The City Lord residents. Why was this faction making things difficult for them? The trio thought about this matter for a while, but were unable to arrive at a conclusion. Hence, they could only drop it for the time being. Luluo wrinkled her nose as she said, "No need to be too worried. Although the City Lord residence is strong, they do not dare to do as they please. It's not like we don't have any powerful backers." Zhu Yuan nodded. "I'll head out and ask around for some information, while also looking up where to buy the underworld spirit fruit and the blood vermilion grass." Luluo grinned. She was clearly someone who was unable to sit still for long. Zhu Yuan and Yao Yao nodded. The House of Geniuses was a mix of both good and bad characters that they did not intend to mingle with. They would rather stay in the room to train. Thus, Luluo went out alone, but it was not long before she slipped back in again, her face brimming with excitement. "There's news." Zhu Yuan was somewhat surprised. That was fast. Luluo eagerly blurted out, "There will be an auction tonight in the House of Geniuses, and both the underworld spirit fruit and blood vermilion fruit have been mentioned. Moreover, the ones gathered here are the various geniuses from all over the Kangman continent, so any treasure can be put on sale regardless of where they came from. Hence, there's likely going to be quite a few gems." From the looks of it, she was extremely fond of such rare and lively events. Zhu Yuan was also a little thrilled at this news. There was finally information about the underworld spirit fruit and blood vermilion fruit. As long as he could obtain these two Genesis resources, his spirit would be able to ascend to the advanced illusory stage, allowing him to begin learning grade 3 Genesis runes. When that happened, he would no longer have to fear advanced Heaven Gate stage opponents. The current him was amongst a gathering of geniuses, of which several possessed the strength of the advanced Heaven Gate stage. If Zhu Yuan did not raise his battle power, he would be disadvantaged when he met them in a fight. Then we'll have a look at the auction tonight. Zhu Yuan decided. The current him needed to the underworld spirit fruit and vermilion blood grass far too much. Time flowed as night began to envelope the enormous Saint Romain's city. The outside of the city was pitch-black darkness, while the inside was brightly lit. Under the House of Geniuses was a vast underground room that was the chosen venue for the auction. At this current time, several geniuses from all over were flooding into the room. It was obvious that many were interested in the auction tonight. After all, the Saint Romain's domain was about to open, and everyone wanted to make themselves as strong as possible. Obtaining a powerful Genesis weapon or treasure would certainly be hugely beneficial to them. Luluo's reputation was clearly much greater than Zhu Yuan's. Hence, the group of three easily acquired a VIP room for themselves. The room had a view looking down from above, the transparent glass allowing them to clearly see the entire place and the auction stage. The other VIP rooms are likely occupied by the super geniuses of our Kangman continent. Luluo smiled craftily at Zhu Yuan as she continued, "Wu Huang may even be amongst them." The hand holding Zhu Yuan's cup trembled slightly, but he did not reply. The expression in his eyes however turned a little graver. He knew that Luluo's words were likely true. Zhu Yuan took a small sip of the wine in his cup as its fiery taste entered his mouth. He had the faint premonition that his meeting with Wu Huang was not far off. "The one that has my sacred dragon blessing, you've been having a pretty good life." While Zhu Yuan was lost in thought, the sound of a gong suddenly reverberated throughout the auction area. The noise quickly died down as excited gaze after gaze focused on the stage. The stage lit up and an elderly figure walked out. The moment he appeared, powerful Genesis chi undulations spread from his body. This elder was clearly an Alpha Origin expert. When Zhu Yuan saw this, he uttered in amazement. To think that they've actually sent an Alpha Origin expert to host this auction, impressive. The latter part of the auction will definitely be hosted by the City Lord residents. This Alpha Origin expert is likely also a member of the City Lord residents, said Lu Luo. Zhu Yuan nodded. While they were conversing, the elder on the stage swept his gaze around the place as his voice rang out in everyone's ears. Since everyone has come here from far away, I shall dispense with the pleasantries. A long time has been spent preparing for this auction, and I believe that everyone will be very interested in our selection. Let's begin. The atmosphere intensified as the elder's final word faded, every gaze in the place now tightly glued to the former. The elder merely waved his hand and a dozen steel tower-like men carried out a certain item, their footsteps heavy as if they were lifting a mountain. The elder reached out a gnarly hand and lifted the black cloth that covered the item. A heavy night black halberd instantly appeared in everyone's sights. The heavy halberd was several feet long and covered all over in veined patterns. An astonishing killing intent spread from it, causing the hairs of anyone who felt it to stand on end. However, it was a pity that there were several cracks on the heavy halberd, making it apparent that this weapon was a damaged article. The elder slowly said, "This is a damaged quasi-heaven tier Genesis weapon. It is known as the Heavenly Luo halberd." Uproar. The auction area practically exploded. To think that the first item would be a quasi-heaven Genesis weapon. Although it was damaged, it could still be considered heaven tier, and a quasi-heaven tier weapon was not ordinary at all. Amazing, the first item is already a quasi-heaven Genesis weapon. Looks like they really put some thought into awing the crowd. Zhu Yuan could not help but exclaim in admiration. One must know that the highest tier Genesis weapon in the entire Great Zhou Empire was the Nine Flames spear owned by his father. But even it was merely a high-grade black Genesis weapon. Don't scoff at this quasi-heaven Genesis weapon just because it was damaged. Its power definitely surpassed a high-grade black Genesis weapon, making it an extremely lethal weapon in battle. With this halberd, an advanced Heaven Gate expert would even be able to do battle with a first-layer Alpha Origin expert. Back then, Su Yuwei had used the remnant power of the Yangming sword in her body to insta-kill an Alpha Origin expert. From this, one can see just how much power a Heaven-tier Genesis weapon possessed. Of course, it must be mentioned that the Yangming sword was definitely much higher up on the ladder than this Heavenly Luo halberd. Bids for this item starts at 500,000 Genesis crystals. The elder's gaze swept across the entire auction area as his powerful voice rang out. The auction area was silent for a split second before instantly being broken by a wave of voices. 600,000. I bid 700,000. 800,000. I hope that everyone will give me, Lu Dameng, some face. Who do you think you are? I've never even heard of you. 1 million. In the short span of a dozen minutes, the Heavenly Luo halberd's price had reached a whopping bid of 1.5 million. Zhu Yuan itched to join in as he watched exhilarating exchange of bids, but could ultimately only let out a helpless sigh. He had no money. Only now did he realize how pathetic his 500,000 Genesis crystals were. After the bid reached 1.5 million, less and less people were able to participate. In the end, a few more rounds of bidding left the bid at 2.1 million. The Heavenly Luo halberd was auctioned away at a price of 2.1 million as regretful sighs rang out in the auction area. There were even more people who were clenching their teeth in frustration because no one knew whose hands the halberd had landed in. Although the majority of the crowd was rather regretful, the atmosphere in the auction area had become pretty lively, and countless burning gazes quickly turned to the stage again. The first item was already so valuable. Looks like the quality of the goods this time was indeed going to be pretty high. The only question was whether even better things would appear later on. Hence, the auction continued under the countless expectant gazes, unstoppable as wildfire. Item after item continuously appeared on the auction stage. Although none of them could match the Heavenly Luo halberd, every item was still considerably rare. Hence, the atmosphere of the auction remained extremely exciting. At this current moment, the elder was once again taking out another item on the auction stage. It was a glass bottle in which a fiery red liquid swam. The viscous liquid was akin to the essence of fire, flames endlessly burning around it. This is the earth essence flame that was extracted from the depths of Wanzai volcano. If it is absorbed by someone who is cultivating a fire-type Genesis Chi, as long as that Genesis Chi is below grade 5, it will be able to raise the rank of the Genesis Chi by 1 minor grade. These words shook the auction area once again, burning desire instantly rising in the eyes of countless individuals. The previous items, including the heavenly Luo halberd, were ultimately external aids. This earth essence flame on the other hand was able to raise the rank of one's Genesis Chi. Although it only worked on Genesis Chi below grade 5, it was still a tremendous boost. If absorbed, a low-tier grade 4 Genesis Chi would rise to the mid-tier. Such an increase in power was definitely not insubstantial. Never imagined that they would even have such a thing. Zhu Yuan could not help but sigh, his heart stirring a little. Although the Omnipython Chi he cultivated was already grade 5, his father's Flame Thunder Chi was only grade 4. If he gave this item to his father, the Flame Thunder Chi would definitely reach the peak of grade 4. However, Zhu Yuan's stirring heart was quickly crushed by reality, because the starting bid for the Earth Essence Flame was 800,000 Genesis crystals. I feel so poor. Zhu Yuan could not help but cover his face with a hand. The Great Zhu Empire had not been a good place for the past few years, resulting its prince having little savings. He was not like the others who could easily accumulate a few million. The bidding war for the Earth Essence Flame was even more intense than the earlier Heavenly Luo halberd. After several minutes of back and forth, the price finally stabilized at 2.58 million. Only after the struggle for the Earth Essence Flame was over did the heated atmosphere cool down somewhat. Zhu Yuan silently waited for the items he needed. After about a dozen minutes, he finally heard the words he was expecting. Underworld Spirit Fruit, 100,000 Genesis crystals. Zhu Yuan's lightly shut eyes opened, his gaze burning with desire as he stared at the stage where the elder was holding a jade case. A black fruit lay within the case. This Genesis resource had a very particular function, hence, not many were interested in it and its starting bid was naturally pretty tame. Few were vying for this item, and the bid only managed to rise to 150,000 after a few rounds. Zhu Yuan waited for his opportunity. When it was about time, he finally opened his mouth, 200,000 Genesis crystals. The sudden increase of 33% was not trivial at all. Several parties immediately give up, while the remaining two only gave in after raising the bid to 250,000. Zhu Yuan breathed a sigh of relief. His entire fortune only amounted to 500,000 Genesis crystals, and just this underworld spirit fruit alone would consume half of it. The rest of his money was still needed to buy the vermilion blood grass. The elder scanned the area as his powerful voice echoed, "Are there any other bids?" Silence. However, just as Zhu Yuan had relaxed, a soft chuckle was suddenly heard. 300,000. The abrupt arrival of this voice caused whispers to spring up in the auction area. Many were bewildered. Why had the price of an underworld spirit fruit risen to such a level? Zhu Yuan's complexion changed slightly, the expression in his eyes sinking a little as he said in a calm voice, 350,000. 400,000, the other bidder immediately kept pace. 500,000, iciness flashed in Zhu Yuan's eyes. Someone was making things difficult for them again. The other bidder was clearly purposely stirring trouble, and did not intend to buy it. When Zhu Yuan called out his bid of 500,000, the other voice seemed to laugh softly before no longer making any noise. Thus, the underworld spirit fruit ultimately landed in Zhu Yuan's hands, but he had to pay 500,000, completely wiping out his entire fortune. There was no change in Zhu Yuan's expression, but fury flashed in his eyes. By the side, Luluo stared at the VIP room in the distance and muttered, "The one that bidded is also in a VIP room. According to my information, that room is exclusively used by the City Lord residents." City Lord residents? Zhu Yuan frowned slightly. When had he offended the saint remains City Lord residents? Moreover, given the City Lord's status, he could not possibly lower himself to vie with those of the younger generation. Luluo pondered for a while. The one inside is definitely not the City Lord, but according to what I've heard, the only other person who frequents that VIP room is the City Lord's son, the junior City Lord, Xiao Tianxian. Xiao Tianxian? Zhu Yuan shook his head. He did not know this person at all, so why was he making things difficult for them? Zhu Yuan's eyes flickered in thought for a while, eventually returning to calmness. However, ice-cold light flashed in the depths of this calmness. It did not matter why Xiao Tianxian was targeting them. Since the act was done, Zhu Yuan would naturally remember. He then looked towards Luluo and asked, "Luluo, can you lend me some Genesis crystals? All 500,000 of his Genesis crystals had been used up. He no longer had any left for the subsequent vermilion blood grass. Luluo waved her hand. Small matter, I'll help you bid it later. Zhu Yuan did not say anything, but he made sure to remember this debt of gratitude. The auction continued. It was not long before the vermilion blood grass finally made an appearance. The starting price for the blood vermilion grass was only 80,000 Genesis crystals, and the competition even less than before. Luluo was the first to shout, 200,000. Her bid directly silenced the place. Those originally planning on bidding instantly became quiet. This bid was akin to roadblock. There was no reason for them to pay such a high price for a stalk of vermilion blood grass. The silence only lasted for a moment. Just as Luluo began to believe that she had already succeeded, a faint laughter was once again heard from a particular VIP room. 300,000. Zhu Yuan's eyelids lowered slightly as the frostiness in his eyes intensified. Xiao Qianxian was really a bit too much. Luluo's face also turned ice-cold. Although Xiao Qianxian was the junior city lord of Saint Romain's city, he did not amount to much in her eyes. Thus, she immediately responded, 600,000. Directly doubling the bid. That VIP room was clearly silent for a moment after Luluo's bid. In the end, a soft laugh emerged. Since little county lord likes this item, I shall not compete. The vermilion blood fruit was now also in the bag, but Luluo's pretty face did not look happy at all. Xiao Qianxian knew that she was the one bidding, but still raised the price. It was obvious that he did not think much of her. Thanks. Zhu Yuan nodded at Luluo. He slowly said, will the junior city lord be going to the Saint Romain's domain? Of course. Luluo nodded. Zhu Yuan softly muttered, that's good. Luluo's large eyes looked at Zhu Yuan. Are you planning on getting even in the Saint Romain's domain? That guy is no pushover, he too is one of the elite geniuses of the Kangmang continent. Zhu Yuan's voice was steady as he replied, I have also slain an Alpha Origin. Luluo's eyes turned round, somewhat unable to believe him. Wu Huang and Blind Sword had killed an Alpha Origin expert, but at least they were at the Advanced Heaven Gate stage. Did Zhu Yuan really slay an Alpha Origin at the Qi Nourishing stage? Zhu Yuan took in a deep breath, his eyes cool and calm as he looked towards that particular VIP room. Xiao Qianxian was it? If we meet in the Saint Romain's domain, I will make you spit out 10 times the amount you made me spend today. With the underworld spirit fruit and vermilion blood grass now in his hands, there was no longer anything else that Zhu Yuan needed from the auction. Hence, he calmly watched as the exciting auction progressed. In contrast, Luluo excitedly bidded and won several items. However, what puzzled Zhu Yuan was that she did not face any obstructions from that particular VIP room. This felt rather strange to him. Could the other party know that these two Genesis resources were important to him? Yao Yao, whom had not said anything since the beginning, suddenly spoke up at this moment. It seems the reason why Xiao Qianxian is making things difficult for you is related to the Jiyu clan. Zhu Yuan slowly said, the Jiyu clan does have some capable people, and one of them has likely guessed the two Genesis resources needed to perfectly absorb spirit source energy. That's why I've been facing obstructions here. Zhu Yuan was able to work things out with Yaoero's hint. Someone from the Jiyu clan must have went to Xiao Qianxian. However, there was still one thing he could not wrap his head around. Just who exactly in the Jiyu clan had the ability to turn the junior city lord against him? While these thoughts swelled in Zhu Yuan's mind, the auction gradually approached its end. It was at this moment that the final item appeared, shocking everyone in the auction area. Even Zhu Yuan could not help but cast his gaze over. One could only watch as the elder on the auction stage very carefully raised a golden case. Within the case was a small stone tablet on which ancient characters were carved. The tablet gave off a slight glow, forming a halo around it. It was a very mysterious and mystical sight. The Genesis technique that has been carved onto this stone tablet is called the Spirit Subduing Technique. It boasts peerless power, and is a genuine Little Heaven tier Genesis technique. The elder's eyes were filled with desire. Even he coveted to a technique of this level. Uproar *. Little Heaven Genesis technique. The entire auction area seemed heave at this moment. Every gaze was filled with burning desire as they stared at the stone tablet. Above the black tier was the heaven tier. Though the black tear was still considerably common, the heaven tear on the other hand, even in the entire Kangman continent, the factions that possessed it were as rare as unicorn horns or phoenix feathers. As for the little heaven tear, in a certain manner of speaking, it stood above the black tear, but below the heaven tear. However, since it was worthy of 3 words heaven genesis technique, a little heaven tear technique definitely possessed overwhelming power. If one obtained it, one would even be able to kill an alpha origin opponent at the heaven gate stage. This was the might of a little heaven tear genesis technique. A little heaven genesis technique, mumbled Zhu Yuan. Even he felt a rush at this moment. He had once heard Zhu Qing say that the great Zhu Empire had once possessed a heaven genesis technique at its peak, but it was subsequently taken away by the great Wu Empire. By the side, Luluo's large eyes were practically emitting beams of light. Never imagined that a little heaven genesis technique would actually make an appearance. Even the Thousand Beast Empire only has 3 little heaven genesis techniques. In fact, a technique that has reached this level can even be called the ultimate technique of an empire. Zhu Yuan nodded. The strongest genesis technique he currently had was the 3rd level of the Dragon Tablet Hand, which had reached the power levels of a high-grade black tier genesis technique. When set next to the heaven tier, the gap between the two was akin to the distance between the sky and the land. Rumor says that one can obtain true blue heaven techniques in the Saint Remains domain. These techniques were mastered by the fallen saint while he was alive, and were thus imprinted into his blood. Since the saint's blood transformed into the Saint Remains domain, various miracles can naturally be found inside. Luluo wet her mouth. This was the true heaven genesis technique that even the Thousand Beast Empire did not possess. Zhu Yuan's heart surged in excitement when he heard this. The Saint Remains domain truly contained unimaginable treasures. While they conversed, the auction area rapidly reached its boiling point due to the little heaven genesis technique. Shout after shout using all of their lungs continued to resound one after another. 4 million, 4.3 million, 5 million. In a mere few minutes, the price of the little heaven genesis technique reached the terrifying sum of 5 million. Luluo had bidded once in between, but her bid was quickly surpassed by other zealous bidders. This depressed her a little, but she ultimately decided to give up after some thought. The prerequisites to learn a little heaven genesis technique will be rather demanding. It's not just a matter of being able to practice it once you buy it, muttered Luluo. Zhu Yuan had zero intentions of bidding because the price was just too high. 5 million genesis crystals was practically akin to a year's worth of income for the great Zhu Empire. However, he did need to be a little careful since the technique was going to land in someone else's hands. Anyone who encountered the eventual owner in the Saint Remains domain would likely be faced with a huge problem. Everyone was fixated on the bidding war, even those in the VIP rooms, who had been rather silent throughout the auction, had begun to bid. After a bitter and intense struggle, a bid of 7.9 million ultimately ended the contest for the spirit-subduing technique. 7.9 million. Zhu Yuan sighed as he shook his head. A little heaven genesis technique was really far too pricey. After all, a technique of this level was already considered top tier in the Kangman continent. Let's go. Zhu Yuan rose to his feet. He already had everything he needed, and could begin absorbing the spirit source energy tonight, allowing his spirit to step into the advanced illusory stage, and open the doors to begin learning grade 3 Genesis runes. The trio left their VIP room and proceeded to pass through the corridor. At this moment, however, Zhu Yuan realized that Luluo's footsteps had slowed, while her originally smiling face had turned frosty. Zhu Yuan followed her gaze, only to find a group approaching them from another direction. At the very front was a guy and a girl. The guy was pretty tall, and was brimming with both confidence and grace. He was currently playing with 2 golden balls on which runes could faintly be seen. The girl was also rather attention-grabbing. She had a hot figure, the black leather that tightly hugged her body accentuating her practically perfect curves, causing many men to secretly swallow their saliva. This group soon arrived before the Zhu Yuan trio. Luluo's face was taunt as she icily said, "Xiao Qianxian, you still dare to appear before me?" Zhu Yuan's pupils immediately shrank as iciness flitted across the depths of his eyes. So this was the guy, the junior city lord of Saint Remains City, Xiao Qianxian. Xiao Qianxian wore a smile, the golden balls in his hand slowly revolving as he responded, "No need to get angry, little county lord. If you are upset about that bit of Genesis crystals, I'll pay you back." Luluo coldly snorted. Her concern was not those few 100,000 Genesis crystals. Xiao Qianxuan's gaze shifted slightly, ultimately pausing on Zhu Yuan as he said, I believe that this friend must be Zhu Yuan, right? Is there anything I can help you with, Junior City Lord? Zhu Yuan's voice was neither friendly nor cold. Nothing much, nothing much. I only wish to introduce someone to you. Xiao Qianxian chuckled and looked towards the sexy girl beside him. The girl opened her long legs as she took a step forward, stopping in front of Zhu Yuan. Her long and narrow eyes seemed to glisten, but Zhu Yuan could sense the snake-like gaze contained deep within them. Are you Zhu Yuan? The sexy girl seemed to smile charmingly. I am Ji Yu Ling, and I come from the Black Yin sect. The one that died at your hands, Ji Yu Lang, is my younger brother. Only at this very moment did Zhu Yuan finally understand why he was being targeted after arriving at the House of Geniuses. It turns out that the source of everything was this girl called Ji Yu Ling. Zhu Yuan's eyes rippled for a moment as he looked at the sexy girl in black before him. However, almost no change could be detected on his face as he nodded and said in a calm voice, oh. Ji Yu Ling was a little taken aback by Zhu Yuan's indifference, but fury soon flashed in the depths of her eyes. The group of guys behind Ji Yu Ling were extremely dissatisfied with Zhu Yuan's attitude, their tone hostile as they chided, you're pretty darn arrogant kid. Why are you still not begging for forgiveness, after killing Ji Yu Ling's brother? The thug-like way they spoke was rather inconsistent with their faint air of nobility. Together with the strong Genesis chi that rippled around their bodies, these characteristics made it painfully obvious that they were the so-called prided geniuses. Ji Yu Ling revealed a heartbroken look at this moment as she softly said, don't be angry everyone, there must be some misunderstanding between our friend Zhu Yuan and my Ji Yu clan, which led to such an outcome. Ji Yu Lang only has himself to blame for his death. However, that appearance of hers only made them glare even harder at Zhu Yuan. Zhu Yuan indifferently watched this scene play out, as if he was a bystander. This girl's methods were superb. From the way she handled this group of geniuses, it was more than likely that they would fight to offer her the moon and the stars. Xiao Qianxian continued to rotate the golden balls in his hand as looked towards Zhu Yuan, and said in a gentle voice, my friend, whatever grudge you guys have with the Ji Yu clan is not important. Since you have already killed Ji Yu Lang, let it end at that. Zhu Yuan raised his eyebrows, but did not say anything. He knew that Xiao Qianxian was not finished. Sure enough, Xiao Qianxian paused for a moment before continuing, but the Ji Yu clan's supreme treasure you stole should be returned to Ji Yu Ling. Xiao Qianxian smiled slightly as he stared at Zhu Yuan. Ji Yu Ling has told me that as long as you return their supreme treasure, she will generously let bygones be bygones. If you feel that I am worthy, I can help resolve the grudge between the two of you and allow enemies to become friends. Zhu Yuan could not help but laugh. These fellows were indeed after the Saint Spirit Crystal. However, it had already been assimilated by him, and now tempered his spirit night and day. They were dreaming if they believed that he would hand it over. Zhu Yuan smiled and asked, is that why you purposely raised the bid earlier? Xiao Qianxian was momentarily stunned, but soon responded in an uninterested tone, it's just a few Genesis crystals, I can repay you if you're upset. A slight hint of mockery could be seen from the corners of his mouth, evidently secretly thinking how typical of a prince from a lowly remote empire, to be so upset over a mere several 100,000 Genesis crystals. No need, there may be a chance for me to get them back in the future. Zhu Yuan shook his head, his tone cool and calm. Xiao Qianxian may believe that his actions during the auction were just a little lesson for Zhu Yuan, but the latter's principle was that every action had a consequence. Simply returning the money was not going to be so easy. Zhu Yuan stared Xiao Qianxian and Ji Yu Ling and slowly said, I can't be bothered to elaborate on the Ji Yu clan's dirty deeds, but they did try to silence us. If not for our resourcefulness, our fates would be rather grim. Therefore, I'm afraid that the likes of you is still not enough to resolve our grudge. As for the supreme treasure of the Ji Yu clan, don't even dream that I'll return it. They nearly lost their lives for this treasure. Xiao Qianxian must have a crazily high opinion about himself if he believed that it would be returned with a single sentence from him. Xiao Qianxian and Ji Yu Ling's expressions finally changed. Xiao Qianxuan's expression was now as dark as a storm as he asked, does this mean that you are not giving me face? Do you really think you deserve so much face? Luluo sneered. Although they were currently in Saint Romain's city and Xiao Qianxian was the junior city lord, matters between the younger generation was settled by the younger generation. Hence, Xiao Qianxian would not be able to use the power of Saint Romain's city against them. If he did, it was not like they did not have their own backers. No one would be the winner once the situation degenerated into a battle between numerous factions. Without the power of Saint Romain's city, Luluo naturally did not fear Xiao Qianxian. Impudent, a mere prince from a tiny empire dares to be so insolent in such a place. The geniuses behind Ji Yuling sneered in succession. They knew Luluo's background and strength, and thus did not dare to pit themselves against her. Hence, the one they turned their fangs at in exchange was Zhu Yuan. A blue-robed young man nearest to Ji Yuling ominously said, "Humph, a mere chi-nourishing stage dares to be so arrogant. Aren't you afraid of being slaughtered after entering the Saint Romain's domain?" This person was called Lan Ting, and was likewise a prided genius from one of the influential clans in the Kangmang continent. In the group, his strength was likely only second to Xiao Qianxian and Ji Yuling. Zhu Yuan smiled as he gazed at these geniuses, a smile that was overflowing with eerie iciness. "We'll have to enter the Saint Romain's domain first to see who gets slaughtered." The group of geniuses shot angry glares over. Ji Yuling's face was somewhat ugly, but this was quickly remedied by her as she sighed softly and said, "It seems that my Ji Yu clan has indeed greatly offended this honorable friend. Why else would you refuse to give face to even the junior city lord and the rest of these amazing geniuses?" Zhu Yuan swept a cold gaze at her. This woman was good. Her seemingly simple words had further deepened the enmity between him and the geniuses beside her. "Woman, you're being rather unreasonable." However, a voice suddenly sounded out from Zhu Yuan's side at this moment. The crowd looked, only to find that it was the white-clothed Yao Yao. She was currently disguised as a male, but her face was still unparalleled in the looks department. Even though Xiao Qianxian and the rest were pretty decent themselves, they instantly dimmed in comparison to Yao Yao. Ji Yuling's eyes brightened slightly at the sight of Yao Yao. Such a handsome pretty boy was truly rare. However, her expression soon turned a little rigid due to Yao Yao's words. Yao Yao slowly fanned herself, using some unknown method to make her voice neutral sounding as she indifferently said, "The supreme treasure of the Jiyu clan was indeed taken by us. If you want it back, there's no need to use these tricks to incite these fools. The Saint Romain's domain is about to open, and when it does, feel free to throw everything you have at us inside. You will be able to take it back if you have the ability. Of course, any action you take will be accompanied by a price. If you fail to snatch it back, no one can be blamed for what happens in the end." Towards the end, Yaoyao's words gave off a sliver of iciness that made one involuntarily shiver. She stared at Ji Yuling as she dished out the final few words. "If you want to play, we will gladly keep you company." The atmosphere became rather silent all of a sudden, everyone stunned by Yaoyao's words. She had already made things very clear. Don't dream of the treasure being returned. If they wanted to snatch it, bring it on, but make sure to be prepared for the consequences. Ji Yuling's pretty face was a blend of green and white. Over the years, she had used her looks to make every male she met grovel under her skirt. Who could have imagined that she would be exposed by a male that was even prettier than herself today? This truly made her feel humiliated. Xiao Qianxuan's expression was also rather ugly. He had not expected that this pretty boy would be even less respectful than Zhu Yuan. Fools. He had actually said that geniuses like them were fools. Fury surged in his heart, but surprisingly, Xiao Qianxian did not say anything in response. He knew that the spirit cultivation of this seemingly Genesis chi-less outrageously pretty boy had reached the corporeal stage. That was true power that could match the alpha origin. Anger also festered in the hearts of the other geniuses, but they too did not say anything. However, the gazes that looked towards Zhu Yuan grew even more hostile. It was obvious that they had pushed all of their rage onto Zhu Yuan. A soft persimmon was easier to squeeze after all. Zhu Yuan rubbed his nose as he gave Yao Yao a thumbs up in his heart. These words were really too domineering. What were these fellows that had been duped by a single girl if not fools? He, what an domineering young master. While everyone was silent, a charmingly lovely chuckle was suddenly heard. Everyone raised their heads, only to find a young lady wearing a black dress leaning against the wall nearby. A flirtatious set of eyes were currently filled with interest as they stared at Yao Yao. The sudden voice caused everyone to lift their heads, and looked towards the young lady in a black dress leaning against the wall nearby with her hands across her chest. Several pairs of eyes brightened slightly the moment they saw her. The girl in black was barefooted, a string of silver bells around the ankles of her fine jade-white legs. A faint mist seemed to linger beneath her feet, making it seem as if she never touched the ground. Her facial features were extremely pretty, and overflowed with seductive charm, like an enticing little enchantress. Xiao Qianshuan's eyes turned a little graver as he gazed at the girl in black and said, "Zuoqiu Qingyu." The pupils of the geniuses around him also shrank slightly, clearly having heard of this name before. Is it that Zuoqiu Qingyu of the Zuoqiu clan? Zhu Yuan's eyes also rippled slightly. It was rumored that she too was one of the strongest amongst the younger generation of the Kangman continent. Luluo's eyes widened as she curiously stared at the little enchantress before them. She had naturally heard of the latter's reputation, but this was the first time she was seeing this individual in person. However, every one of these gazes were practically non-existent to the girl called Zuoqiu Qingyu. Her peach blossom-like eyes focused only on Yao Yao. Her figure suddenly moved, accompanied by the clear twinkling of bells, as she appeared in front of Yao Yao like a phantom. So quick. Practically everyone present was shocked. None of them had been able to clearly see her movements. "Hey, what's your name?" "I'm Zuoqiu Qingyu, let's be friends." Zuoqiu Qingyu beamed as she looked at Yao Yao, the former's limpid eyes filled with curiosity. This person was actually as pretty as herself. In addition, the thing that drew her interest the most was Yao Yao's demeanor, especially those eyes that seemed to be both penetrating and empty. When Zuoqiu Qingyu made her entrance earlier, everyone else had their breaths taken away. He was the only one that seemed to have no reaction at all. Zuoqiu Qingyu could sense that Yao Yao was not pretending, and was truly not interested in the former. Yao Yao was also slightly taken aback at the sudden appearance of Zuoqiu Qingyu so close to her, but soon regained her wits. She was currently disguised as a guy after all. However, Yao Yao was not interested in explaining things and casually answered, "Zhu Xiao Yao." "He, your name is as pretty as mine." The corners of Zhu Yuan's lips twitched. Zuoqiu Qingyu was a little narcissistic, but she did have the assets that were worthy of such narcissism. Yao Yao paid no attention to Zuoqiu Qingyu. She looked towards Xiao Tianxian and Ji Yuling and said, "Remember my words. If you want it back, come and snatch it after entering the Saint Remain's domain. Such useless and petty tricks are better kept under the table." Her tone was light, not even the slightest hint of anger, but it contained a cold authority that no one dared to retort against. She turned around to leave after finishing, leaving behind a group of stunned young men and women. Zhu Yuan and Luluo hastily ran after her, while Zuoqiu Qingyu's eyes spun in thought for a moment before also following. Xiao Qianshuan's handsome face was somewhat ugly as he watched their leaving figures. The matter today was supposed to have been easily resolved. Zhu Yuan should have given him face as the junior city lord and returned the Jiyu clan's supreme treasure to Ji Yuling. He was initially debating whether he should make Zhu Yuan apologize and make amends to Ji Yuling after returning the treasure. Who could have expected that the other party would have no intention of giving him any face? Now, not only did they fail to get the treasure back, they had even been intimidated quite a bit. By the side, a stormy look flashed in Ji Yuling's long and narrow eyes, but she made sure to reveal nothing on her face as she let out a bitter laugh and said, "I've really wasted Junior City Lord's painstaking efforts. I had thought that this matter could be solved peacefully." Her words only fanned the flames of rage in Xiao Tianshuan's heart as he replied in a low voice, "Humph, although that person's spirit is at the corporeal stage, he's still too arrogant. So what if your spirit is strong? If you carelessly allow someone to close in, you will still be killed in a single blow." The other geniuses echoed in agreement. Though it was true that those who focused solely on spirit cultivation could borrow the power of Genesis runes, their bodies were exceedingly weak and a single slip may result in the destruction of their physical bodies. Moreover, iciness flashed in Xiao Tianshuan's eyes. "I've heard that Zhu Yuan seems to have a grudge with Wu Huang of the Great Wu Empire. I wonder, will he be able to protect Zhu Yuan from Wu Huang with just his spirit?" Ji Yuling's eyes immediately brightened when she heard this. Only a handful of individuals amongst the younger generation of the Kangman continent could compare to Wu Huang. He was after all someone who had slayed an Alpha Origin expert with the strength of the Advanced Heaven Gate stage. Though that handsome pretty boy did possess a corporeal stage spirit, he would not be able to find any advantage against Wu Huang. The Saint Remain's domain is filled with mystery and anything can happen there, and he cannot possibly protect Zhu Yuan all the time. Once they are separated, killing Zhu Yuan will be as easy as a flip of the hand. Xiao Qianxian looked towards Ji Yuling as he continued, that's why there's no need to worry. A mere qi-nourishing stage kid won't be able to create any splashes. Ji Yuling smiled faintly, her gaze seemingly much gentler when she looked towards Xiao Qianxian. Xiao Qianxian suddenly said, the envoys from the 6 sacred sects will arrive at Saint Romain's city tomorrow. I believe that the Saint Romain's domain will open soon. Joy and anticipation were revealed in the eyes of Ji Yuling and the other geniuses. The Saint Romain's domain was surrounded by a giant holy river. It was said that even a leaf would sink when it fell into the waters of the holy river, while fog dominated the sky above the river all year long. This fog was extremely strange. Anyone who entered would immediately lose his sense of direction, and a single wrong turn was all it would take to fall into the river and drown. Fortunately, the mist would grow thinner every once in a while. As long as a powerful practitioner took advantage of this timing, a route could be torn open, allowing people to be sent in. There were no practitioners of this level in the Kangman continent, only the 6 sacred sects had such power. Hence, they would send out envoys to help open the Saint Romain's domain, which also gave them first pick of the prided geniuses that managed to distinguish themselves from the rest. The arrival of the envoys from the 6 scared sects meant that the Saint Romain's domain everyone yearned for even in their dreams was about to open. I'm so mad. That bastard Xiao Qianxian. I'll definitely teach him a lesson if we meet in the Saint Romain's domain. Along the way, Luluo was still seething, clearly rather miffed that Xiao Qianxian had actually dared to not give her face. Zhu Yuan chuckled, but did not say anything about this topic. Although there were some twists and turns, they had ultimately succeeded in obtaining the underworld spirit fruit and vermilion blood grass. Tonight, he would borrow the power of these 2 Genesis resources to absorb a drop of spirit source energy. Once he did so, he would surely break into the advanced illusory stage. He suddenly turned his head somewhat helplessly and looked in Yaoero's direction, only to find Zuoqiu Qingyu grinning widely as an unending stream of words left her mouth. Brother Xiao Yao, where are you from? I can see that although you do not have any Genesis Qi, your spirit is extremely powerful. We should team up so we can watch each other's backs in the Saint Romain's domain. Yao Yao was split between being annoyed and amused, but she could not be bothered to explain things, so she ended up ignoring Zuoqiu Qingyu. Yao Yao said to Zhu Yuan, I'm hungry, let's eat. A smiling Zuoqiu Qingyu quipped, everyone, since fate has brought us together, let me treat all of you to a meal. The delicacies of the House of Geniuses is number 1 in Saint Romain's city. Yao Yao paid her no attention. Luluo's large eyes began sparkling when she heard the word delicacies, while Zhu Yuan was naturally indifferent. Although Zuoqiu Qingyu was a little odd, she was indeed very strong, and having more friends was something Zhu Yuan would not reject. Hence, the group was led to the upper floors of the House of Geniuses by Zuoqiu Qingyu. However, Zhu Yuan's footsteps suddenly froze the moment he stepped onto a certain floor. He lifted his head as if sensing something, and looked towards the far right, where a figure in gold robes was peacefully seated next to the window. The seats around him were empty, because of the astonishing aura that swirled around his body, an aura that made everyone wary. When Zhu Yuan's gaze fell upon the figure in gold, the omni-python chi in his body involuntarily began to heave as if releasing an angry roar. The dragon's resentment poison on his palm also hissed as an intense pain pulsed from his hand. The emotions on Zhu Yuan's face were cut away bit by bit, still as a statue, as he stared at the figure in golden robes. The figure in golden robes also seemed to sense something, the moving teacup in his hand pausing slightly, before he slowly turned his head. The gazes of the two met at this moment. The entire world seemed to fall into silence. Rumble. Thunder rumbled in their bodies as their blood began to boil. In an instant, both of them simultaneously knew who the other party was. Great Zhu Empire, Zhu Yuan. Great Wu Empire, Wu Huang. This video will end here.